McNamara, welcome to the Fade to Black podcast. How are you?
I'm very well. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we're such huge fans of your work and we're so excited to talk about the roses. I feel like watching this, it reminded me of a sort of like a drawing room play. And I'm really interested in how you were able to kind of adapt this quite American text, but kind of turn it into a kind of British comedy of manners. So I'd love to talk about that.
I think probably because the whole genesis of the project was Benedict and Olivia wanting to work together and Searchlight sort of, I knew Olivia from The Favourite, and then Searchlight sort of brought me in, and I think it was I didn't want to remake the movie and neither the old movie, and neither did they. And I was interested in the book, and so in the end, it was like let's reimagine it. And part of reimagining it was thinking about Benedict and Olivia and just what brilliant actors they are. But they're also great with language, and I really love language, and I really love the sort of English sense of humor and the banter and the sort of repartee, that sort of style of English comedy is something I really love, and that theatrical background. So I thought if we lent into that, and then this idea I had of sort of putting them in America to give this sort of context for that kind of humor and also fish out of water, and it would stick them together so that they didn't have anyone else to rely on. They were sort of their own country within a country. That might be really fun.
So, you're no stranger to dysfunctional couples. I feel like the great, it's
Yeah.
probably one of the most dysfunctional. So I guess like get approaching this sort of film, and I guess your experience on working on The Great. Was there anything that you kind of learned about navigating this type of a relationship, quite tempestuous relationship that you brought to the Roses?
I think on the great I think I like couples who are they're sort of locked into a relationship in an intimate setting, but also they have an outside world that's sort of dragging on them. And I kind of, in the grade, it's like, they've got their intimate relationship, but they've actually got, the future of Russia hanging as well as part of the stakes of their relationship. And I guess this, in a more sort of realistic contemporary way, was this idea that our identity is so tied up in what we achieve in the outside world now. And usually both partners, have this desire, and it's what being a success in the outside world, or all your identity being wrapped up in that idea, does to an intimate relationship, especially if one's successful and one's not. And I was just interested in how difficult that is for people, that we've sort of created this society where part of it is the enemy of an intimate relationship because it sort of drags you out of it all the time, and it keeps self-reflecting on you badly or well. And so I was sort of interested in that stuff.
Yeah, and I guess, like the 50s or something, the woman stayed at home. It wouldn't really be a conversation. But here it's, women. My mum was the breadwinner in my family. My dad worked for my mum. So I think it's really interesting to kind of every so often it's like, well, yeah, feminism is why I want to have a job. So I guess like weaving in sort of like the gender politics of today. Because I think there's a lot of stuff on like TikTok and online about relationships and red flags and protecting your peace. And so I wondered, they don't seem particularly kind of susceptible to that sort of like therapy speak. But yeah, were you kind of cognizant of the kind of conversations that's going on today about like navigating relationships and now that inform the kind of gender politics of what you're showing in the film?
I wasn't that. I mean, to a degree, because I live in the world, but I don't live in the world that much. Being a writer, who's not online, I'm not online. I don't have social media and stuff. But I think I was more like, I was sort of cognizant of it, but I was really interested in how hard that makes it for people, more than I was like what's right and what's wrong, and how should we all live. I feel like there's enough of people telling us how we should all live, but I was interested in how difficult we make our lives for ourselves by wanting so much and by identifying with certain things so heavily. I felt like, oh, we're really like we're real idiots sometimes at kind of just making our lives so difficult. And so I was sort of interested in that. And, I'm in an industry where tons of, a lot of creative people are married. Like I'm one of I'm married to an actor. And so you're always balancing your ambition with your relationship and how much each of you can do, and still be where the couple's sort of coming first.
Mm. And so I'm interested then because obviously both Benedict and Olivia, as you mentioned, they have such a control of language. They're such stage people as well as screen. So I would love to know if initially shaping these characters to suit them. What were those conversations? So you having did you I don't know if it was over Zoom, having a drink down the pub or something to talk about, I guess, like your own horror stories and experiences that you've existed within your relationships to funnel into this story?
Not really. I mean, I think what's good about them is, I mean, I obviously knew Olivia from The Favourite, and I just met Ben, but I think there was something about that. I mean, I think good creative, everyone stays in their own lane to some degree. So it was more like they were, how do you see it? And I would tell them how I saw it, and then we would have, a bit of a discussion about it, and then it's just go write the script, and then it gets informed from there, like conversations off the script, and their producing partners, Ed and Adam and Leah, have sort of as much input as they do in a way of like, but I think knowing them, I knew the rhythms of their speech, and I knew and I knew how quick they were as people. So I was partly like getting that sense of, oh, they're so quick, they're so funny. So it's like, oh, I'll try and get that in the characters, and so from there.
Yeah, I mean, I love Olivia because I love it when she swears. I don't know if you saw Wicked Little Letters that she was in,
Yeah,
uh, but she's got a good mouth on her. I love
she
it.
does. She does swear so delightfully well.
And I guess like writing that sort of dialogue, I mean, I'm always interested as well because as much as it's set in America, it's very distinctly British and certain
Yeah.
Britishisms. And I guess trying to make that translate to I guess a universal audience. So I would love to know like a few of the lines that kind of stuck out or things that you might have to tweak or change in just to kind of nail the kind of transatlantic appeal, I guess, for it.
There was a kind of like I mean, I'm lucky because I've worked in both countries a fair bit. So, but it's still not as precise. So sometimes there would be. I'm trying to think if there are any lines. There was a couple of things Andy Samberg had that were particularly not even American, they were particularly Californian, that he felt like there was a sort of California-esque way of saying something. So things like that. And then, I mean, I'm pretty collaborative to tweaking bits and pieces as we go. So, and I was there on set all the time. So there were kind of quite a few, I guess, little tweaks, or you're always doing that. But yeah, and the good thing was, English producers, American director, and a bunch of American actors. So it was a kind of good, as long as we all understood everything, it felt like we were okay.
And I guess you've got such a great history of writing female characters. I wrote something recently for Mashable about why I really like women behaving badly. And obviously, in The Favourite and Poor
Yeah.
Things, these are women behaving badly, but there's this real societal expectation of women to be good. So they could do the most minor thing and it'd be like awful, but if a guy did it. And so I guess pertaining to the film, I think it's really interesting the kind of balance that there is between Theo and Ivy, is the sense of who's it's not hero and villain. They've all got both sides of them. So I guess yeah, navigating that territory where you want to make it not as much too sympathetic for one person over the other. So yeah, finding that balance.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was always the idea. I was sort of like, I don't really, it's like when your friends get divorced and you're like, who's to blame? And they've got their story and they're like, he's awful or she's awful. And the truth is somewhere in the middle. And it's like, I think I was always like, I'm more interested in the difficulty of two people who are in love, trying to stay married, who don't just have the emotional skill set to do so. And so I wasn't, but we were really conscious that we wanted it to be like that, where the audience weren't, they'd sort of tipped back and forth throughout the movie. and ultimately, hopefully, ended up with like, well, they're both sort of to blame and not to blame in about equal portion, you know.
I always feel like every time I describe any issue, I'm always like, it's just like Rashomon, you know? It's like, that's my
Totally.
go-to reference. That's my
Yeah,
go-to
yeah, yeah.
reference.
It's true.
Um, I mean, is it quite a cathartic experience? Because I don't know, my own stuff, I've been writing some scripts and I feel like it's been this real beautiful way for me to like process a lot of like grief and pain, especially towards relationships. And I was able to kind of articulate my feelings about things through stories and characters. So I guess with something that, isn't as much of a kind of genre concept that would be like some of the previous films, like to kind of be quite cathartic to be able to write these feelings and perspectives into the story.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I don't do it very consciously, but I do think like writing for me has always been like catharsis. It's always been catharsis in the sense of like I don't know how to live without doing it. So I can't go on holiday without it. I can't, unfortunately for my family. But, I have to write, every day. So I think, and then yeah, it's true. I think there was something about it's almost like if your head's a bit muddled with ideas about relationships and why we all find it tricky, and then writing a movie like this does make you kind of analyze it a bit more, I guess.
So is it like this is therapy? Any issues you had in your relationship, you're like, done, sorted. I wrote this movie. We were fine.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Let's hope so.
You mentioned you write every day, I guess. What are the type of things that you're writing? Is it all to do with projects or is it just writing for yourself? I'm so intrigued.
No, it's always yeah, no, it's always projects or um yeah, because I'm always writing a couple of things at once, and so I don't do much of my own. I don't do much just journaling, or sometimes I do, but not very often. Mostly I'm writing story, or I'm breaking story, or I'm thinking about why I messed up the story. One of those things.
And is it easy to balance several projects at once, getting into different mindsets for different films? Like, is there a way to compartmentalize it? Or does it give you a little break and it actually working on another film can actually suddenly like trigger something or flick a switch? You're like, oh, I can go back and do that. I'm really interested in the process.
No, I think it's I have this thing about writing that the whole thing is you personally are a psychological maze devoted to not writing well, and you have to spend your life trying to work out the hacks through yourself. And writing on more than one project takes the pressure off a project. If I write on one project, like I tried it last year, and I just put too much pressure on it, and I'd worry about it too much, and then but if I've got two, I'm running so hard to get them done. It kind of turns off my conscious mind a bit much. So I'm a bit more able to give myself a break, and
Mm.
I'm just happy to have done 7 pages. I don't care if they're any good. Whereas if I do 7 pages, got nothing to go to. I'm like, I'll just tear my head apart thinking they're not good enough.
Yeah, I read Stephen King's On Writing, the
Oh
memoir,
yeah, it's great, huh?
and it's so fantastic. I mean, I'm not one of those things where, obviously I'm not Stephen King, but it was really nice to kind of recognize some of myself in the practice. And I
Yeah,
just really like the idea of the concept that, and I spoke to Ryan Coogler about this. He was a big fan of that book that influenced
yeah.
Sinners a lot, and he was saying how, how it's like a story is just two ideas coming together. And I guess for you, when you're doing adaptation, is that still kind of the case? But when you're doing original stuff, like when you're kind of conceiving maybe an original story versus an adaptation, is it that sense of like two ideas coming together? Like where
Yeah, I
does your
think
kind of
yeah, I think so. And even with adaptation, I think because I take a pretty broad view of adaptation, it feels like my idea meets something else. And with originals, it's usually that kind of feeling, like a feeling of like, oh, an idea came from the outside, and that actually clicks with something that's inside me, and you just kind of run from there, really.
Yeah. Well, going back to the roses, the way it looked, it kind of does remind me of like a Nancy Meyers sort of film, like the kind of production design, very middle class kind of family. Um, you wrote it. How much of that is in the script of how much like the setting? And I guess I'm interested about because you could basically do it anywhere, but you chose that specific location. So how much are you writing about that in the script or giving freedom to kind of directors to J Roach to come in
Oh,
say,
yeah, I think you always are just, I mean, I always feel like I'm just indicating and in a way, if I write a heavy description of something, it's story and, or a little bit description is tone. But I kind of knew I felt like I wanted it in Northern California only because I know Northern California really well. So that was mainly it. I was setting something in America. The part of America I know best is up above San Francisco. So it's practical things like that. And then they kind of, you're always like in a dance of like what the director wants it to look like. And also then they meet the hard practical details of how much money we have and all that kind of stuff. So I'm never really wedded to what I write in that way. I'm always like, that for me is what's interesting, what the director goes, well, it's going to look like this, or we'll do
mm,
this. So I want to do it here now. Or like the museum it ended up like sort of a collaboration of what I'd said, what Jay wanted, what Mark could achieve. And so then we slowly like rewrote what the museum he was designing. I can't even remember what it was, but it's nothing like how it ended up.
mm. And when you came up with the name We've Got Crabs,
Yeah.
did you chuckle to yourself? Like, was there different versions? Because actually, it was just like chef's kiss, literally chef's kiss.
No, I think that was the first version because I think I always saw her sort of reluctantly ambitious.
Mm,
And so it was probably there was a bit in the script that was she was much more. I just like cooking. I don't mind if I'm not successful. And then the joke was she actually loved being successful. So yeah, that just came up. It was one of those ones where where you kind of think it's great and you kind of think it's dumb to the point where you're like, is this great or dumb? I could get rid of it. So it was something I thought about getting rid of several times, but I'm glad I didn't.
no, I'm glad you did. It made me chuckle every time I see it on screen.
Yeah.
I guess just kind of talking about screenwriting at the moment and the kind of landscape that it is. I mean, obviously you've been doing this for so many years now and you've had such great success. I mean, what's your kind of perspective on the landscape at the moment, as being a screenwriter and getting to make films? Because there's such remakes and, so much stuff going on where it
Yeah.
feels like I don't know, everything's IP now. But it's like
Yeah.
I like with the roses because I think it's the best form adaptation because it kind of fits the medium with which and the timing with which it's set versus let's just do, like the kind of live
Just
action remakes that we get of The Lion King. It's like shot for
yeah.
shot.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think it's a tough I think since the strike it's been a tough time to be a writer. I'm the luckiest writer around, so but I do think it's tough if you're a younger writer trying to break through is really hard at the moment. And I think the IP thing is tricky because it is what everybody is kind of hankering for in the studios and so it is like how do you well, I guess like Roses, I was like, I don't want to do a remake and I want to like, so it's a way of, I guess it's like if you're a writer, it's taking a piece of IP and going, how do I make that something out of my own voice? And this is how I view it, I guess. I'm
Mm,
always like, well, what do I want to make? Yes, it's IP and that's important for the studio and I respect the IP we came from because it was great. But it's also like as a writer, you're like, I've really still got to make it my own and find my own voice within it and find what I want to say within it. And then, and then you hope that is okay with the studio and, that they go on that ride, which Searchlight are always, great about.
y-
They want the sort of original version of that IP.
yeah, I think because I feel that Searchlight has certainly retained that kind of mission
Yeah,
to make
for
sure
sure.
for like original like kind of stuff that and a really good example of really good adaptation I thought was Dead Ringers, the TV show that was
Yeah,
adapted from I think because that felt like completely different and different hands
yeah,
of the
totally.
writers. You mentioned kind of the strikes, and one of the things I was really cognizant of is the kind of AI and how that's become interesting. For me, AI is I use it as a tool when I'm transcribing. So I have an app, so Otter app, and it transcribes it. And
Right.
obviously, I double check because sometimes it's not very good at transcribing. But it's interesting to see that there's more of these things coming up where it's like coverage AI or, ways in which studios and filmmakers are kind of using it to prototype ideas, reduce development time, and kind of personalize stories to data. Are you aware of that things going on? Does that worry you that it could be kind of making not the writer obsolete, but certainly when it comes to stuff like writers' rooms, I feel like they're not as big as they used to be. People are investing much money, and I think you spoke before, how what a great experience you had in the writers' room for The Great.
Yeah. Yeah, it worries me a little bit because I think anything that makes it harder for young writers is something that's concerning, and anything that reduces opportunity for young writers is really difficult to watch. If as you say, I had young writers in the grade, and I've always had young writers I sort of mentor and stuff. So I do think it's on the ground, it's tougher to get work, it's tougher to get an episode of things. And I don't, yeah, and I think the AI thing's tricky because it's, they sort of scraped our copyrighted material and to a massive degree, and then we sort of have to suffer that. And then I think I don't know. I mean, I still obviously have faith that a human has their own voice, has their own but I don't know. It's hard to know where it goes. I mean, it depends on I'm an old guy, so I'm sure my young boys will be like AI, and if you talk to professors in universities, they're like, if you're a 19-year-old kid, you're a bit like, well, how can I use it? They don't what's the utility of it for getting me ahead? And I guess that's lots of writers, and I know writers use it as their own mini room separate to the studios. They're tossing their ideas in to help their pitches and all that kind of stuff. So I guess it's just like something we can't stop, and we'll see what happens.
There are a lot of people who use ChatGPT to kind of work out relationship stuff.
Yeah.
They put it in it, and it's also this weird thing where it kind of validates them. So I can imagine the version of the world where like Ivy's going into ChatGPT and it's like, tell her you're right, you've got it
Yes,
all right.
exactly. Exactly. I know.
Um,
Yeah. It's
yeah. Yeah, I guess what I really love is like this is very much a film that's clearly written by a writer, and it sounds weird to say that, but after what we just talked about, there's such a the kind of rhythm, the tone, the kind of dialogue. It felt like such a unique thing. Um, I there's an article that went out today on The Guardian about the algorithm movie where films are getting made where they have to have certain words put in. And I guess
right.
have had experience of that where you've got execs saying, "Hey," because I know it's happened in a few films, but like
Yeah. Right.
having obviously studio notes, but like how far does that really go? Is it kind of you need to throw in a scene that references this? I mean, not just product placement, but just like we need to have this line so when it goes on the streaming, it'll get picked up.
I don't know. I've never heard that. That's funny. I've never heard of that. No one's ever. I mean, obviously, we were aware of, the algorithm is very like running things to some degree now, on most of the streamers, particularly. But I don't know. I haven't heard that. That's crazy. But I guess it makes sense because I guess it's like, what's that thing in radio? Old school radio was like earworms or something. So I guess they're
Yeah.
like, you need like words that are earworms, and people like, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's funny because it's sort of well, I always think with well, maybe it's a bias because I love language so much, but I do think we as writers underuse language and underuse our that weapon in a way that um that I think it does de-individualize the people's work because it does feel
Mm.
like we haven't got an individual take on language.
Yeah. And I think it's also catering to this idea of, I guess, second screen. It's the idea, let's throw so much exposition in so that if they're looking on their mobile phone and not watching
Yeah.
the screen, it's like they can
Yeah.
still keep up with it. Um,
Yeah,
well,
I think that's probably going to be more the case. Is just how we deal with the fact everyone's attention is going to be a different animal than it was.
I want to be in your offline world where I'm not looking at things. 'Cause even I have to put my phone in another room because while I'm watching a screen it, because I'll end up just like this like muscle memory of just picking it up. No,
Oh yeah,
no,
yeah,
no.
totally.
I guess I kind of just like to end on, I guess, is there a film or anything that you've watched recently that you were like, oh, this is fantastic that maybe you could recommend to our listeners?
Oh, it's trying. I don't know. I read a book I thought was great.
Oh,
I
yes.
hate to recommend a book. It
No,
sounds very
do.
old school of me. No, it's called The Orphan Master's Son, and it's I think it won the Pulitzer like 5 years ago, but it's a really good book about it's set in North Korea, but only in a kind of made up way. And it's just really good about a society that starts agreeing, just stories just get agreed with, even if they're not true, and everyone knows they're not true. And it's a good book about power and it's sort of absurd as well. So anyway, that's my recommendation.
Have you optioned it? Is this going to be in a few months
And
announced?
no, I know. I think what was nice about the book was I thought, oh, I don't really know how you do this, but so I felt like not work, just fun.
Oh, we love that. Well, thank you so much,
Yeah,
Tony. It's been great to
no
have you on.
worries. It's a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thanks a lot. Bye.